Hello and welcome, Year 10 triple scientists. Back to the plants topic. This is plant disease. And today's driving question is: do plants have an immune response? At the top of your page, please could you put the question: do plants have an immune response? And our keywords for today are physical, chemical, mechanical, pathogens, and herbivores. Why are we learning about this topic? Well, almost every ecosystem and animal, including humans, depends on plants for energy. By understanding how plants work, we can improve the yield of crops and help protect our environment. Right, you've got some starter questions for today. First one is, what is an immune system? Please pause the video, have a think about this. Okay, hopefully you've said something along the lines of it is a host defense system, and it protects against pathogenic infection, especially. Um, so it's called an immune system because you can eventually become immune to the disease, which means that you won't be able to get it again once infected already. What cells do animals have that protect against infection? Have a think. It is the white blood cells. Specifically in animals, we have phagocytes, which do phagocytosis. That's when they engulf and digest the invading pathogens, and lymphocytes, which can produce antibodies, but also they can remember that the pathogen has invaded before and therefore leads to immunity. What other defense do animals have against pathogens? Well, we have barriers. We have all sorts of interesting barriers like our skin, but also we've got ones like nose hairs, which will catch the dust and the germs on their way in as we breathe in. Blood clots, which will then, if we do get a cut, a breach in our skin barrier, if you will, it will then block that up. And also we have lots of mucus, which not only just in our noses but down in our lungs as well, which will help catch the pathogens before they can infect us. So hopefully this is the information from some previous topics that may be useful in today's lesson. Right, what plants can you think of that can defend themselves? So straight away, lots of our minds will be going to cactuses, perhaps roses. They've got these thorns, they've got spines. Quite obviously, they do not want to be eaten. They do not want anyone messing with them, otherwise they'll spike you. Makes sense? But there are more ways that they defend themselves, and actually a lot more subtle ways that perhaps we won't have thought of before. Okay, why do plants need to be able to defend themselves? And that is because, of course, microorganisms may get in. We've seen last lesson that there are pathogens like bacteria, fungus, viruses that will infect plants, but insects, of course, will do too, like the aphids we saw last time. Here's a caterpillar. But also there are large herbivores, so that's an elephant. But also you've got all kind of grazing herbivores. Those are plant-eating animals. So the cacti and the rose bush that we looked at a second ago, they've got spikes. We know that if we were trying to pick a cactus or a rose, we might get spiked. So already we might be thinking about that's a type of defense against herbivores. But there are lots of ingenious ways that plants defend against all the others. Due to the variety of attacks, they have evolved different defense mechanisms, and today we've split them up into physical, chemical, and mechanical defenses, really. And these are key words for today's lesson, and we're going to have to know some examples of each of these defense mechanisms. Right, the first one we're looking at today are physical barriers. Okay, now just like people have got barriers, like we've got skin that will stop pathogens from getting into our bloodstream, plants too have got physical barriers. They're basically largely to reduce the invasion of pathogens. This means preventing bacteria, fungi, virus from getting into the plant in the first place. One example of this is a cellulose cell wall. Plant cells have the cell wall around them, as we might remember from the cells topic, animal cells don't actually. And the fact they've got this cell wall made of cellulose, which is a tough, insoluble sugar, it resists the entry of microorganisms. A further thing to think about is the question, why would an aphid be a problem then? So, last lesson we learnt that aphids have got these hypodermic needle-like mouthpieces, and they actually stab into the plants. In fact, they stab into the cells, breaking through the cellulose cell wall. So, although physical barriers may protect against some, like microorganisms, an aphid may be able to break through. So it's not perfect, but that's why they've got lots. Some example of physical barriers, and you are going to need to memorize these. Physical barriers are the cellulose cell wall that we've just talked about. That will resist the invasion of microorganisms. They have a waxy cuticle. This is that waterproof coating you will have seen in the first plant topic. This will again mean that microorganisms will have a hard time getting in. Trees are covered in bark. This is a layer of dead cells which creates a protective layer which is very difficult to penetrate. It's also difficult to digest. Insects have a hard time chewing through the bark as it's made of lignin, which is the same stuff that xylem are made out of. It's like wood, basically, really, really tough. And it's layers and layers and layers of these dead cells on the outside. That's what bark is. The last one of the physical barriers is a little bit of a stretch if you're thinking of an actual barrier, but leaves can fall off plants. This is actually really useful because if a leaf gets infected, say it gets covered in a fungus, the plant, the tree, can just drop its leaves, and then obviously that means that the infected tissue will be removed, and therefore the pathogen is no longer connected to the tree. So you're physically moving it away. It's no longer able to infect because of physical barrier, which is the fact that it's actually moved off. Does that make sense? So those are your physical barriers. Next, I'd like to talk about the chemical barriers. These are a lot more ingenious, a lot more subtle, I think, and it's all based around chemicals, as you might have guessed. So these are mainly antibacterial chemicals produced by the plant. This will then obviously protect them from invading pathogenic bacteria. Some of these plants, like mint and witch hazel, we already extract and use their antibacterial chemicals. So mint plants contain antibacterial properties. They've got chemicals inside them. In fact, the mintiness of mint plants actually puts off pathogens from invading the plant. They've got chemicals inside them which kill bacteria. How might we be able to use these antibacterial chemicals as humans, as people? Well, actually, current antibiotics are becoming less effective. This is because of resistance evolving in bacteria, as we would have learned in the infection response unit. So we are looking into plant-based chemical defenses to develop new ones. So compounds inside pines, cypress, euphorbias, and hypericum, these ones, are plants that contain antibacterial chemicals already. You do not need to memorize these examples, but you do need to remember the fact that plants contain, or some plants, more than others, contain chemicals that fight microbes. In fact, pretty much all herbs and spices contain chemicals that will deter animals and especially microbes. Imagine being an insect taking a bite out of garlic and your whole head is just filled with garlic taste. I mean, it's almost the same thing. It just puts them off. In this case, they're actually antibiotic, however, and they kill bacteria. Okay. So what about defense against herbivores? We've talked about the physical barriers and the chemical defenses against microorganisms, but what about large herbivores, even small herbivores like insects, still pose a threat. So this is where the mechanical adaptations come in. So mechanical adaptations are mainly for defense from small and large herbivores who might feed on the plant. So physical, chemical for microorganisms, mechanical for larger organisms, the herbivores. So what's the problem here? If a large herbivore eats the plant, then it's destroyed the plant. It's taken all of its nutrients and ripped it up into pieces, and it's basically dead. If a small herbivore eats the plant, then it can damage the plant, obviously. It can be a vector for pathogens. So just like when a mosquito bites a person, it may let the malaria protozoa in, which then can cause the disease. In the same way, if an aphid penetrates the physical barrier by getting into the cells of its mouthpiece, then it can infect the plant with viruses, perhaps. So there are obviously negatives to being eaten by herbivores. So what can plants do about it? These things. They can produce poisons. I'd just like to make the note that mechanical adaptations can be chemical as well as physical defenses. This is just for the herbivores. So they can produce poisons. The animals will quickly learn to avoid eating plants that make them feel ill. They can have thorns. So thorns are like what roses have. This makes it painful for large herbivores to eat. They can be hairy. So I'm sure some of you will have come across hairy plants before. This could be on the stems, this could be on the leaves. This deters insects from laying eggs. And then when the eggs hatch, the grubs will eat away the plant. Or it could just simply just stop the insect from being able to walk around it and stop it from feeding on the plant. This one's quite rare. Drooping or curling of leaves when touched. So actually, some plants have got a like they physically move quite quickly when when touched. They detect being touched and they quickly move away. This can dislodge insects and can frighten larger herbivores as a mechanical defense. And finally, mimicry. Now this is an interesting one. Some plants can actually copy unhealthy plants to put off herbivores. If a herbivore is choosing which leaf to eat and it can see these droopy, off-coloured leaves, it might go, you know what, I'm not going to eat that one because it looks a bit wrong. So this is a form of mechanical adaptation. Very clever. Right, now it's over to you. I would like you to match the type of defense to the definition of the defense. Down the side, you've got mechanical, chemical, physical. Can you pause the video and then assign it its correct definition? Okay, welcome back, Y10. Let's have a look. So mechanical defense would be an adaptation that deters herbivores. Chemical defense are when plants make and release poisons and toxins to attack pathogens and perhaps deter herbivores, but they're especially antibacterial. And physical is an actual barrier, a physical barrier which prevents pathogens from entering the plant. Okay, again, question for you. Have a read of these four statements. Which one of these is false? Pause the video and we'll go through the answer when you come back. Okay, welcome back. Which one is wrong? It is, of course, the first one. Mechanical adaptations protect the plant from microorganisms entering. Nope, it's not mechanical ones. That would be physical. Mechanical adaptations protect the plant from herbivores. There we are. Right. Um, this is the point of the lesson where I would normally ask you to turn to your neighbour and to discuss this question. By discussing questions out loud, by trying to explain an answer to somebody, what you're doing is you're creating those links in your brain. This will definitely help you remember something long term. One of the best ways that I know how to memorize something is by trying to teach somebody it. So Unfortunately, because we are not in the lab, you are not going to be able to turn to your partner. What I'd like you to do now is to pause the video and go find somebody in your house. It could be parent, it could be brother, sister, it could be your pet, it could be your neighbour over the fence. I want you to tell them the answer to this question in as much detail, using as many of the keywords as possible from today's lesson. How are plants adapted to fight microorganisms and pathogens? Pause the video and go tell them everything that you've learned from this video. When you come back, I'll show you a comprehensive list of the ones that you do need to remember. Okay, good luck. I hope you have some good conversations. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you had some quite productive conversations there. How are plants adapted to fighting microorganisms and pathogens? Well, they have physical barriers, such as the cellulose cell wall. This will help reduce invasion by pathogens. The waxy cuticle, again, reducing invasion by pathogens. Bark on trees, which is hard for pathogens to penetrate. Leaf fall, meaning that infected leaves are lost and reduces the spread. Next, we've got chemical defense. Mint and witch hazel are examples which have got antiseptic properties. This just means that they, antibacterial, they kill microorganisms that get onto them. Deadly nightshade is an example that produces poison, which makes animals feel unwell when consumed. Mechanical, drooping or curling of leaves, which will make insects fall and surprise larger animals. Thorns, which means it's unpleasant to consume. Hairy stems, which stop insects laying eggs, or just even being able to walk over them. Mimicking an unhealthy plant to trick animals into not eating them. So really, fighting microorganisms, that's going to be focused on the first two. So if you've said the physical adaptations and the chemical adaptations, well done you. Mechanical's more for larger ones, the herbivores. Right, now we've come to that point of the lesson where it is over to you and I'd like you to do some writing. As always, I would like you to work your way through to describe, explain, use and combine sections. This is kind of how we have split up the lesson into objectives, but these are as questions. So can you please put on your page, describe, explain, use and combine, answer these in order. You've got the keywords down at the bottom and we will run through the answers and do some marking afterwards. I would give yourself about 10 to 15 minutes working on this. And by all means use your notes that you've made throughout the PowerPoint. See you in 10 minutes. Hello and welcome back, Year 10. Right, let's have a look at those answers. Right, now would be the time in the lesson where we get our green pens out. If you do not have a green pen, don't worry, any other colour will do. The important thing is that not only are you just ticking your answers when you get them right, and you should be doing that, by all means, you have got it right, give yourself a tick, but adding the extra detail that you've missed, or perhaps if you've made a mistake, now is the time that I'd like you to add your edit them and add the answers in. Right, name the 3 types of plant defense response. Can you remember those? Physical, chemical, and mechanical. Explain the difference between physical, chemical, and mechanical plant responses. Well, physical barriers reduce invasion by pathogen, literally stop pathogens getting in. Chemical barriers or chemical defense protects against invading pathogens and deters animals from eating the plant by using chemicals. And the mechanical adaptations try to trick or deter herbivores. The yellow section, the use section, summarize 3 examples of each physical, chemical, and mechanical plant response. Well, we've seen this one already. Physical cellulose cell wall, waxy cuticle, bark on trees, and leaf fall. The chemical, some examples were mint and witch hazel. Deadly nightshade is the example that I used a minute ago, which produces poisons that make animals feel unwell or straight up kills them. It is deadly. And then there's the mechanical ones that we said before. The section combined, the blue section, explain how plants are adapted to fight microorganisms and pathogens. Well, that's the bit in blue. So cellulose cell wall reduces invasion by pathogens. Same with the waxy cuticle. The bark on trees is hard for pathogens to penetrate, and leaf fall means that infected leaves are lost and reduces the spread. and the chemical defense have antiseptic properties or antibacterial properties. And there we go. Those have been our objectives for today's lesson. As always, I'd like you to write your "Today I have achieved" sentence. Please can you pause the video and fill in the gaps. Today I've achieved describe, explain, use, or combine. Make sure you're using those words there and say what you can do. Because I can, and actually fill in the blanks using one of these. For instance, today I've achieved use because I can summarize 3 examples of physical, chemical, and mechanical responses. Happy? Right, can you do that now, please? Okay, marvellous, Y10. As always, you've got a 10 question Show My Homework quiz. Don't forget to do that after you finished this lesson. That's just to show us that you've done the quiz, you've learnt the information, but also it will be a good recap, as repetition is the way to get memory stuck into your head, and you are probably quite aware that there is a lot of content in this topic. Right, well done, Y10. I'll see you next time for some work on hormones, plant hormones. Bye for now.